As your administrator, may I point out that at this moment we have a bed count of 304 patients. Now, don't you find it strange that not one of these 304 patients is scheduled for major surgery?
Peter Sellers is hospital administrator, Albert T. Hopfnagel.
You show me a patient who returns home after 3 weeks in hospital without a scar, and I'll show you a patient ashamed to face family, friends, and the employer. Oh, took out my appendix.
Where does it hurt? Only where you laugh.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're going to catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, doctor, help me.
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're going to make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first.
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Hello from the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And our movie is asking us the question, Where Does It Hurt? From 1972.
Where Does It Hurt was directed by Rod Amateau, from a screenplay by Rod Amateau, based on the novel The Operator by Rod Amateau and Bud Robinson. And it was produced by Rod Amateau, William Schwartz, and Joseph Shaftel for Cinerama Releasing Corporation.
Wow, Rod, give someone else a job. Where Does It Hurt stars Peter Sellers as Albert T. Hopfnagel, Joanne Pflug as Alice Gilligan, Rick Lenz as Lester Hammond, Harold Gould as Dr. Zerny, Pat Morita as Nishimoto, Eve Bruce as Nurse Lamarr, Hope Summers as Nurse Throttle, Paul Lambert as Dr. Bernie Pinikhes, Norman Alden as Katzen, Keith Allison as Hinkley.
Also appearing are Bret Halsey as Dr. Paolo Quagliomo, Albert Reed as Dr. Sam Radcliffe, J. Edward McKinley as George Laffingwell, Kathleen Freeman as Mrs. Mazzini, and Gene Byron as Dr. Kincaid.
The song Where Does It Hurt twangs us through the opening credits as we see the exterior of Vista View Hospital.
Peter Sellers as Albert T. Hopfnagel comes down the hall, and Nurse Throttle comes out to speak with him. She informs him that a patient died at 11:15 this morning, and Hopfnagel has her change the time of death to 12:15 so that they can charge this patient for an extra day's stay.
Yes, he will have died at 12:15. And make sure she writes that down and block off the door so that nobody goes in there. And she willingly complies. And we get more of the god-awful song, and a disclaimer comes up.
The disclaimer tells us that this is a true story. Only the names have been changed to avoid lawsuits. No reference to the American Medical Association or any of its members is intended. In fact, this film is dedicated to the honest, sincere MDs whose lives are devoted to the sacred Hippocratic Oath. Will those three doctors please stand up?
Har, har, har. I guess they really didn't want doctors to recommend this movie to others. So the credits finally finish, but not the song, as Lester Hammond, laid off construction worker, comes in for a chest x-ray.
We know this because he goes in still wearing his hard hat.
Yeah, we don't know what his profession was, but, well, he's one of those ones where you have to wear a hard hat.
He goes up to the reception area and explains to Alice Gilligan that he was just laid off, so he thought he'd spend the rest of the morning getting a chest x-ray, as one does when they get laid off.
Apparently his doctor recommended it because of the smog problem in Los Angeles. That's where this is set.
Alice starts asking Lester about his personal and financial situation. He has no health insurance. He's divorced. His ex-wife got the doctor. He got the house. That's all Alice needs to hear. That house means he has collateral, so he's going to make a great patient for Vista View.
She kicks off her shoe and toes a button on the floor. This brings out Albert T. Hopfnagel, hospital administrator. He's holding some papers, but he stops short when he sees Lester Hammond.
Yep, he tells Alice that what he wants can wait. This man is in obvious need of medical attention. Lester and Alice both say no, he's just here for a chest x-ray. Then Hopfnagel notes that this man must just be naturally pale. Then he says that one can't be too careful with the LA smog, and why stop at just a chest x-ray? They can perform a full checkup on Lester.
And he convinces Lester that he needs every expensive test that they can provide. And as we see a montage of him getting those tests, the lower part of the split screen shows us the ever-increasing bill.
Actually, these charges do seem reasonable enough.
They seem reasonable in 2025. In 1972, when the movie came out, they probably were a bit much. But yeah, $14.85 for a chest x-ray? Sign me up. When the montage ends, Lester has given a hard-won urine sample to a nurse, and he relaxes on an exam table.
The urinalysis, by the way, has a price tag of $12.80.
That seems like a lot for someone just to look at your pee. But what do I know? I wonder if these prices are actually what the hospitals pay now, but thanks to insurance, they jack it up so that it looks like it costs a lot more. We'll never know, though.
Suddenly, Dr. Zerny, the assistant chief of staff, rushes in with a needle in his hand, muttering something about that they still haven't found that dog with the rabies. He pulls up Lester's t-shirt and holds up the needle, but Lester holds the doctor's arm back. "I'm trying to save your life, Epstein." The nurse corrects him. "This is Lester Hammond, not Epstein." "No charge," says Dr. Zerny as he goes off to find Epstein. A scream is heard from another room, and Lester asked, "Epstein?" "Hopefully," says the nurse.
Then Dr. Zerny returns, still calling Lester Epstein. "Hammond," retorts Lester. And now it's time to drop the title of the movie, not for the first time. Dr. Zerny asks him, "Where does it hurt?" Lester says, "Nowhere."
He's just in here for a checkup. Dr. Zerny gives Lester a preliminary examination and, still calling him Epstein all the while, tells Lester he'll have to be admitted to the hospital. "For what?" asks Lester. "About a week," says Dr. Zerny.
This man is a homeowner, so he gets admitted to the hospital as Epstein.
In the next scene, Alice is gathering Lester's information for his hospital admission. When she calls him Mr. Epstein, he corrects her, and she changes the paperwork to say Epstein, Hammond.
She also says that since he's a homeowner, there's no deposit for his medical care.
Next, Lester is sent up to the lab.
On his way to the lab, Lester turns back and ogles Alice's legs. She catches him and smiles, even putting a little finger kiss on his lips. She thanks him. She needed that. It's been a rough day.
Then Alice calls ahead to let Nishimoto, the lab tech, know that the patient that's being sent up has the healthiest test she's ever seen, and hopefully he can find something.
Lester goes into the lab where Nishimoto, played by Pat Morita, tries to bait Lester, and Lester responds by making a short joke, thus enraging Nishimoto and making an enemy for life. And this is our first example of the bits that Pat Morita does as this character, all in different accents.
Now we're back at reception, and Nurse Throttle tells Lester that they want his stay at Vista View to be a pleasant one, so they have a wheelchair to take him to his room. He says he's fine and he can walk, but this is against hospital rules, and they insist he take the chair, which incidentally has a charge of $6.85.
And Oscar the orderly pulls up behind him and basically rear ends him, so he lands in the chair against his will, and he rides to room 406. And again, we see the bill increasing. Lester takes the third bed in a non-private room. Nurse Throttle appears and tells him to get into bed.
She tells him he's very sick. Lester asks what it is that's supposed to be wrong with him. "That," says Nurse Throttle, "is between you and your doctor."
In the lab, Nishimoto calls down to Alice to tell her that Epstein is about to be very sick. Alice's Christmas bonus thanks him. He plans to spend his bonus over Lester's dead body. Wow, he's really made an enemy.
Then Lester calls his girlfriend to let her know that he's been admitted to the hospital, and they'll have to cancel their planned trip to Las Vegas. His girlfriend tells him that whatever he's got, he didn't get it from her.
Yeah, Lester doesn't understand why he's in there, and he can't adequately explain it to his girlfriend. I think that relationship's over. Now we're in a staff meeting.
All the doctors are around a conference table, and Hopfnagel interrupts the meeting to tell them that they have 304 patients that are admitted currently, each with a voracious appetite, and not a single one of them is scheduled for surgery.
And this is unacceptable. And then he thanks them for their attention to that matter. In turn, the doctors are outraged that he's asking them to operate on healthy patients. And Hopfnagel makes a case for preventative surgery. Take out that prostate before it becomes a problem. And if a patient is going to spend 3 weeks in the hospital, they should go home with a cool scar.
Then he adds a PS. He wants the doctors to know that their prospect for their usual annual dividend is low this year. Hopfnagel leaves, and one doctor says they need to amputate that horse's ass. They discuss how. Yeah, the money is nice, and do they want to rock the boat? They don't really come to a decision.
One doctor likes his dividends and his watermelon red Lincoln. And this is when we kind of realize that this movie is not going to be PC at all. There's a black doctor, there's an Italian doctor, there's a stupid doctor, and they basically lay on the ethnic jokes whenever possible, like the watermelon red Cadillac for the black doctor. At any rate, the doctors are concerned about what the hospital commissioner is going to do to them.
Now we find ourselves in the office of George Laffingwell, MD, and he has had enough complaints about VistaView that he feels he needs to shut it down, but he's going to need evidence. His aide, actor Paul Gleason, suggests he just go over there and do a surprise inspection.
Laffingwell says he would, but every time he's gone over there for a surprise inspection, Hopfnagel is ready for him somehow. But nonetheless, he schedules another one and tells his male secretary the time and date as he leaves the office.
His secretary, who is a stereotypical gay receptionist, makes a call to Hopfnagel at VistaView to give him a heads up, and he expects his usual $100 for this information. Next, Alice comes into Hopfnagel's office to confront him about a rumor she's heard. Hopfnagel had been caught in the second-floor linen room with Nurse Lamarr. Hopfnagel simply says that inspecting linen rooms is part of his administrative duties, and Nurse Lamarr was caught smoking in there, he was just pushing her out. Then he shoos Alice out of his office.
In Lester's room, the statuesque Nurse Lamarr is giving one of Lester's roommates a massage. When she's done, he tells Lester that his Blue Cross is paying for his extended stay after his sprained finger. It was okay after a few days, but he gets to hang out there for however long the insurance is going to pay for it, I guess. But he tells Lester that since he doesn't have insurance, if he doesn't pay, he's going to lose his house.
Just then, Dr. Zerny rushes in, calls Lester Epstein once again, and once again asks him, where does it hurt? Where does what hurt, says Lester. Why must you people always answer a question with a question, says Dr. Zerny, pushing Lester down onto the bed. He starts feeling his abdomen, then he tells Lester where he should and does hurt, and that he has an abnormally high white blood cell count.
Yeah, Lester had demanded to go home as soon as Dr. Zerny walked in, but Dr. Zerny just ignored that and got straight to the fake diagnosis. And we get a couple of intercut scenes. We're at the nurse's station. They make a joke about the size of a football player patient's penis because he needs a bedside urinal. And then cutting back from Lester's room, there's another where they see Dr. Zerny and wonder how he ever made it through med school.
Then Dr. Zerny rushes out of Lester's room to tell everyone that he's made a break in the Epstein case. Nurse Throttle says that she'll get everything ready for post-op, which means Dr. Zerny will have to schedule Epstein for surgery.
She basically walked him through the whole diagnosis. She saw the white blood cell count. She realized that he needed to be dealt with surgically, and Dr. Zerny is just basically nodding in agreement with her.
Yeah, he hadn't considered this, but now it seems necessary since she's scheduling for post-op.
It's funny the way he bluffs his way through this. Harold Gould is kind of a great actor to play this doctor, and he's so incompetent, and he does it beautifully.
So he officially lists Epstein for surgery, and when Throttle asks what kind, he says exploratory.
We'll find something.
Next, Zerny rushes to the lab to talk to Nishimoto, who is now speaking in a southern accent, to see what he thinks about the white blood count in Epstein's chart. Nishimoto says it's obviously appendicitis.
And Zerny believes this, despite Lester denying being in any pain. And he declares that this is an emergency and rushes off to find a better surgeon.
Dr. Zerny next goes to talk to Dr. Pinikhes, who happens to be his brother-in-law, to get his opinion. He says the patient is showing signs of appendicitis but has no pain. So Dr. Pinikhes suggests that Dr. Zerny go into air conditioning. But nonetheless, Pinikhes does sign off on the surgery.
He's going to help him, which is good news for Lester. This is kind of a funny scene. Nurse Lamarr comes in with a tray and some medication. She asks Lester if he's allergic to penicillin. Lester says no, takes the pill that she offers. He asks what he needs penicillin for, and she says he doesn't. She gave him a sedative.
Yeah, she says it's chloral hydrate, which isn't really a thing.
Well, it was prescribed by Dr. Zerny, so you can't expect it to be the right drug. But it does put him to sleep. But not before he gripes that he wants to go home. And his other roommate, Hinkley, tells him that there's not a chance. He's been there for 4 or 5 weeks for a stomach bug.
Every day he gets stressed, hoping that today will be the day they'll let him go home. Then Dr. Quagliomo comes in to do Hinkley's daily checkup. He tells Hinkley there's still some congestion in his lungs. Maybe tomorrow? Hinkley asks hopefully. Not tomorrow, says the doctor, because tomorrow's his golf day. But maybe the day after that.
What's funny is that he's heard it so many times that they're basically saying the same thing at the same time. But it definitely proves his point. Now Dr. Zerny comes in the room to get consent for Lester's surgery. Unfortunately, Lester's now asleep. So Zerny tries to get the others in the room, like Oscar the orderly and Hinkley, to back him up. You heard him say yes, right? Nobody's going to do that, though.
Next, we're in Dr. Hopfnagel's office, where Dr. Quagliomo is trying to get a good deal on a hysterectomy for his sister-in-law.
Yes, she needs a hysterectomy. She wants him to do it, but she can only pay in green stamps. Do you remember green stamps?
I remember them from the Brady Bunch.
I vaguely remember my mom having A&P green stamps. It's like Kroger points, where you buy a certain amount of stuff and you get these in return. But you could actually use them not just for discounts on groceries. You could use them to get prizes, like a game show kind of thing. But she wants to turn hers in lieu of cash. She's president of the Ladies Auxiliary something or other, and they had a falling out, and she kept all their collected green stamps. And she's got enough for surgery, she thinks. Hopfnagel agrees, but only if he can charge her 4 times the going rate. $2,000 worth of green stamps for a $500 surgery.
Next, we see Nurse Lamarr going down the hall to a Pepsi machine, and she starts singing Indian Love Call into the slot.
When I'm calling you.
Yeah, that song's from the 1920s, so I think it's public domain by now. But I mean, you can sing it on the podcast.
Oh, I should probably apologize for that regardless.
It turns out this Pepsi machine is kind of a facade door, and Hopfnagel from the other side returns her Indian Love Call.
It's actually a Pepsi machine that takes money, though, as we'll find out later. And it's also a door to his office that only a few people know about. However, this song is the signal that it's time for them to have sex somewhere in the hospital.
Hopfnagel calls the operator and tells her to hold all calls. He has some important work to do in his office and to make sure that the staff is aware.
For at least an hour.
So immediately the operator calls Alice to let her know, and Alice suspects she knows what important work Hopfnagel is intending, so she gets an idea. She goes to a payphone and calls in a fire alarm for the linen room on the second floor of the hospital.
Which is exactly where Hopfnagel and Nurse Lamarr are heading, and they do a little subterfuge, like she's walking with a pile of linen saying, "Oh my gosh, I forgot something," and heads back in there. Now it's time for the surgery. Dr. Pinikhes and Dr. Zerny are operating on Lester. They're baffled that his appendix is fine, but since they have him open anyway, they're going to take it out as a preventative measure. This is Pinikhes' idea, not Zerny's.
Yeah, Pinikhes announces to those present that they are going to remove this man's inflamed, yes, that's right, he said inflamed, appendix. Any questions?
And I think everyone knows better than to ask any at that point. The surgery commences, and Dr. Zerny sneezes his mask into Lester's abdominal cavity. Bernie razzes him about his ineptitude, and Lester's bill increases.
In the next scene, we're in the stairwell with Nishimoto, and he's just hanging out there looking up Alice's dress as she descends the stairs. He tries to pay her a compliment by telling her that she makes his eyes round.
Oh, God, this movie. Nishimoto reports to Alice that Hopfnagel could be on his way out for taking out a healthy appendix, the surgery currently in progress.
This isn't a common occurrence at this hospital, but this is a case where the patient just may find out about it.
He coaxes a promise of future sex out of Alice and starts to tell all, but unfortunately gets interrupted by the fire brigade.
Alice sends them up to the linen room on the second floor.
But the barrage of firemen running upstairs between the two of them has sort of derailed Nishimoto's train of thought. There's a fire upstairs. He can't talk about Hopfnagel now. Alice is still trying to get the information out of him, but he's changed his mind about that and future sex with her. She's a cold woman.
But then Alice agrees that a lawsuit would surely fix Hopfnagel good. Alice is still angry with him, so she's in.
And then in the next scene, we see the firemen axing their way into the linen closet, and they turn their hose on Hopfnagel and Lamarr. And they don't stop, even though they realize there's no fire there.
The next scene, we see a bucket on the table of the conference room, which appears to sit just beneath the second floor linen closet. And now we're back at Laffingwell's office, and he tells his aide that what Hopfnagel did to that nurse, he's been doing to the hospital all along. So he's going to go ahead and do that surprise inspection.
But sooner than he planned.
Laffingwell's secretary immediately calls Hopfnagel to tell him that inspection is coming, but he doesn't know exactly when.
Hopfnagel says that his bribe is going to be radically affected by this lack of knowledge. And then they do a funny little bit where a billboard's getting replaced. It's a billboard with the doctor holding his hand out to his two patients. That half of the billboard is removed, and an insurance billboard goes up, but what goes up first is a cornucopia full of money, which now appears to be falling directly into the hands of the doctor. Just a little sight gag to get the point across.
Then we return to Vista View, specifically the roof where a patient, this is Katzen, is bowling on said roof.
That's Lester's other roommate, the one who was getting a massage.
He has a bowling ball, but he's using bedside urinals as pins.
He rolls a few balls and then decides it's time to go back to his room, which he does by flipping himself over the edge of the hospital roof, ball and all, and climbing down to his own window. As he struggles to get back into his bed, he drops his bowling ball, which rolls directly onto a recuperating Lester, who awakes in agony.
Then Oscar the orderly comes in,
holding the ball.
He returns the bowling ball and tells Lester he needs to get back into bed. He'll tear his stitches from his appendix operation. This is all news to Lester. He never gave consent for an appendectomy, and now he wants to blow the whistle on this whole operation.
They go to the bathroom to have a private discussion.
Oscar tells him that he can't help, but it's against the rules. Not even when Lester offers them $5. But when he ups it to 10, Oscar agrees to help.
Yeah, he's going to go fetch that chart from Nishimoto's lab. However, to bring it back will cost him another $10.
So next we see Nishimoto mixing chemicals in the lab. He's
bopping along to a Chi-Chi's commercial. It's so funny. When's the last time Chi-Chi's was even a thing? And we're hearing their commercial. A little burrito song.
The phone rings, and Oscar tells him that Hopfnagel wants to see him in his office. So Nishimoto heads off, and going down the hall to Hopfnagel's office, he throws flowers to each of the women in the reception area as he heads there.
Then we see Oscar getting into the lab, finding Lester's test results, and leaving. In his room, Lester's trying to call the DA as his roomie is yammering at him about Hopfnagel.
Next we see Alice and Hopfnagel having a confrontation in Hopfnagel's office. He threatens to fire her for calling in a false alarm with the fire department. She storms out, and she passes Nishimoto on his way in.
Nishimoto razzes her a bit and then goes into Hopfnagel's office. He's not welcome because he wasn't really sent for, but Nishimoto doesn't care. He flops onto Hopfnagel's couch and asks him for the $350 worth of bribes that he should have received by now for inventing reasons for patients to get surgery. Hopfnagel skillfully gets rid of him without paying. He's quite the operator.
Then Hopfnagel notices that someone is trying to buy a Pepsi from the fake vending machine that he uses as a door, so he goes to the back of the facade and grabs the change that he's collected. He's only got $1.25, so he decides they'll have to put more salt in the patient's food.
So finally, Lester has gotten a hold of Laffingwell. Laffingwell thinks that this could be his big break, but is disappointed to learn that Hammond can only report on his own unnecessary surgery. That's not going to be enough. Nurse Throttle walks in and overhears part of this conversation.
Lester notices this, so he pretends to be talking to his parents instead. Then it says he can't talk now and ends the call. Laffingwell's aide suggests that this guy may just be some nut with a new take on the whiplash scheme. Laffingwell admits that may be a possibility, but hopefully it'll turn out to be the Ralph Nader of bedpans.
There is a topical joke if ever there was one. Oscar the orderly comes into Hammond's room with the report, but Lester has to hide it when Zerny arrives to check on his surgical wound. Hammond complains that they took out his healthy appendix, but Zerny claims it wasn't healthy and asks Oscar to back him up that Hammond agreed to the surgery. Oscar doesn't play along, and he escapes the room. Zerny says he had to operate based on his white blood cell count.
He starts to explain that when a white blood count gets that high, but Lester interrupts him. What about a count of 5,500? Why, that's normal, says Dr. Zerny. Lester shows him his actual lab results that Oscar had nabbed from the lab, and Zerny looks at it with alarm.
And he snatches the page and runs. Next we see Nurse Throttle reporting to Hopfnagel that Lester, or Epstein as he's known now, was calling his mother, who, according to his records, is deceased. Then we see Zerny in the lab confronting Nishimoto about the apparently mistaken test results. Nishimoto mocks Zerny with his Groucho Marx impression. Then Zerny runs off to Hopfnagel.
Nishimoto calls over to Hopfnagel to give him a heads up that Zerny's on his way, and he does this with a British accent.
In Hopfnagel's office, he's consulting with Dr. Quagliomo's sister-in-law, Mrs. Mazzini, when Zerny bursts in. Hopfnagel talks him down by convincing him that low white blood cell count is post-surgical. Relieved, Zerny leaves.
Hopfnagel goes back into his office, where Mrs. Mazzini is still waiting, and she's still wheeling and dealing for her surgery. She has a suitcase full of green stamps, and Hopfnagel agrees that all planned expenses seem to be accounted for.
All expenses except for sales tax, which is $80, and does she want to pay now by cash or check? Mrs. Mazzini is outraged. She's paying 4 times the price plus tax, so she gathers up her stamps to go.
Then Alice calls to let Hopfnagel know that there has been a patient complaint. Someone claims that his appendix was removed while he was asleep. Of course, says Hopfnagel, that's standard procedure. He hangs up, and Mrs. Mazzini starts to leave again, telling him that he could forget about the hysterectomy. She's going to buy a color TV. Then Lester barges into the office to announce that he's suing the hospital. Alice, who followed Lester in, smirks.
They leave, and then Hopfnagel goes after him, locking Mrs. Mazzini and her green stamps in his office. And we never see her again. I thought maybe she died in there or something.
Next we see Lester, still in his hospital gown, perusing cards in the gift shop when Hopfnagel goes up to him. He has an offer he hopes that Epstein can't refuse. He can enroll him in health insurance retroactively. He asks how the meals are, and Lester is non-committal in giving an answer, so Hopfnagel calls Alice over and tells him to put Epstein on a high-protein diet and to charge it all to his insurance.
And aside from a better menu, he offers him cigars and a cold beer nightly. And Lester seems a bit swayed by this generosity. I liked how he started off by saying Lester should just accept that what's done is done, and by the way, he never has to worry about a burst appendix in the future. That didn't work. He had to sweeten the deal.
Now Hopfnagel goes to the operator to do some recon. He has to find out what calls Lester has made. She gives him the list, and Hopfnagel goes to the telephone and calls Laffingwell. Laffingwell answers, and Hopfnagel says, "This is Epstein." Laffingwell asks, "Did you get anything on Hopfnagel yet?" And Hopfnagel hangs up.
Now he knows.
"This damn day is shaping out lousy," he says.
Then he goes down to the bowels of the hospital to find Oscar. He threatens Oscar's job. Oscar, who has got a wife and kids, can't afford to lose that. Hopfnagel asks for half of the bribe that Lester gave him, so Oscar forks over the $10.
This comes after Hopfnagel asks how much he was willing to sell out the hospital for, and Hopfnagel starts out at 100, and Oscar says, "No, it was nowhere near that much."
Yeah, Hopfnagel is surprised that it's quite so low. Once he gets the money, he tells Oscar that he needs to be a team player. It's always people who are the least team-like that demand that, isn't it? Now Hopfnagel is on the roof of the hospital. Even though it's broad daylight, he says it's close to sundown, Alice followed him out there. Since it seems that Hopfnagel's approach to any problem is to bribe his way out of it, he hints to Alice that he can't start their family if he's out of a job. She wants to know if he just proposed to her, but he weasels out of directly agreeing that that's what he did. They banter a bit as Hopfnagel and Alice take down the flag and fold it up as Taps plays.
So the next scene, we're back in Hopfnagel's office. He's lying down on the desk and Alice has him pinned down and she's macking all over him. Apparently this so-called proposal has convinced her to change alliances and to find out what Epstein knows and tell Hopfnagel.
I guess they let Mrs. Mazzini out because she's not there. Then we're back in the patient ward where Katzen has taken his bowling game to the hallway, urinals and all. Lester and Hinkley are sitting in the doorway watching, Lester smoking a cigar as Hinkley plays guitar.
Alice comes down the hallway and heads toward Lester to try to work him over. He invites her to have dinner with him. After all, he's not paying for it. He goes on to say that the hospital will keep him there anyway. If he gets better, they can simply take out another organ. All they'd have to do is get the lab to fake another report and the cycle starts over. Alice is uncomfortable with the amount of information that Lester has access to, so she says she has to get back to work. Be sure to tell Hopfnagel everything I told you, says Lester. Alice leans down and whispers in his ear, maybe you'd like to work under Hopfnagel too. Lester whispers back, might be too crowded with all three of us.
She runs around the corner and goes into that Pepsi machine false door. Although Lester doesn't see her go in, he figures out that must be where she is, so he pries the door open and follows her in. Alice comes out of Hopfnagel's office into the reception area where Hopfnagel is talking to Throttle. Alice says she has to talk to him now.
So Hopfnagel takes Alice to his private bathroom, and Nurse Throttle reaches behind the desk to grab a bunch of chocolates and stuffs them into her mouth. An alarm sounds and Hopfnagel returns, confiscates the chocolates, and then he goes back to hear what Alice has to say.
Oh, man.
Alice tells Hopfnagel that Epstein knows everything, so Hopfnagel thinks it's time to do Operation Epstein. Alice turns on the shower. The walls have ears, she says. Then she suggests that they off him.
With a literal operation, like neutering, a lobotomy.
But that's not Hopfnagel's style. He says what they're going to do is give him gourmet food and anything else he wants. They'll win him over with extreme generosity.
He wants Epstein to have one continuous party, to keep him stuffed, soused, and sexy. The first two are his responsibility, but the third is all Alice. She's aghast that he'd ask his future wife to sleep with another man. But Hopfnagel says that's a sacrifice he's willing for her to make. And then he pushes her squawking out of his office restroom. He turns off the shower and leaves. Then Lester exits the shower. He was there the whole time, and now he's sopping wet.
But he's heard everything. Hopfnagel returns to Nurse Throttle, and they're going over a patient's chart, making sure that all charges have been accounted for.
And added to when necessary.
They've added $275 to the bill. Suddenly, Nurse Throttle asks if Hopfnagel had left the water running in the bathroom, and Hopfnagel goes to investigate.
There's water oozing out from the door.
He enters just in time to see Lester running out the Pepsi machine facade door. We go out into the hallway where we see Lester bracing the door shut, and Hopfnagel has come out the other door and surprises him.
He gets between him and the Pepsi machine and gives him a kiss, mafia style. We know that because they play Godfather-type music. So they go to the regular meeting place, the gift shop.
Hopfnagel asks him how much he's getting from the Hospital Association for his espionage. Nothing, Lester says. So Hopfnagel offers him $250 a week and a desk. Then he tells Lester to think it over and get out of those wet clothes.
Nishimoto appears, jumping up and down in the background so we can see him, and asks for his $350. Hopfnagel provides him with a check for $300 and leaves. Up in a corridor, Alice meets Hopfnagel and hands him her letter of resignation. She says she wants to go furniture shopping with him. He tells her that he's busy, but she should go buy whatever she wants and spare no expense. He'll reimburse her subsequently.
Next, Hopfnagel joins the doctors in the conference room. They're suffering the humility of the leaky ceiling from the second floor linen room, and they know that this is all Hopfnagel's fault. They tell him he's terminated, but Hopfnagel refuses to hear this. They reiterate it, and he asks for another chance.
A soap opera-style organ starts playing. The music cues in this movie are ridiculous.
Hopfnagel says he can change, and can't they forgive and forget? But the answer is no. Then Hopfnagel gives a speech telling them that they'll have his resignation in less than an hour. But no resignation necessary, they say. He's fired. Hopfnagel walks out. Someone says that they're finally finished with him. I don't think so, says Dr. Zerny. He didn't say 10-4. He always says 10-4 when he finished with somebody. He should have said 10-4. He didn't say 10-4.
So Hopfnagel returns. Looks like he's crying, but he's actually laughing. He enjoyed their little joke. They nearly got him. Then he departs, saying 10-4.
Next we see Hopfnagel talking with Nurse Lamarr. She's heard Alice is buying new furniture before she quits her job. Hopfnagel adds that he told her to spare no expense. Would you ever do that to me? Asked Nurse Lamarr. Of course not, he says. You already have furniture.
Now we're back in the boardroom, and Zerny wonders if Hopfnagel really thought it was a joke. Someone needs to talk to him. So Zerny apparently has volunteered himself, and everyone votes that, yes, that he has to go do that. So in Hopfnagel's office, somehow he times Dr. Zerny bursting in, and then shuffles him straight back out. He's not going to talk to him.
As he's being escorted out, Zerny tells Hopfnagel that he really was fired, and it wasn't a joke, but Hopfnagel says of course it was a joke. But it wasn't as funny as Zerny pulling out a man's appendix who didn't need an operation.
So he's got a little blackmail on Zerny. I wonder who else he has blackmail on.
Well, we won't find out just yet because next we're with Nishimoto, and he's on the phone trying to confirm the validity of the check he's received from Hopfnagel. It's drawn on the National State Bank, which doesn't seem to exist. Or at the very least, they don't have a phone.
And now it's Quagliomo's turn to tell Hopfnagel that he's actually fired. But Hopfnagel's got blackmail for him too, because he performed a hysterectomy on his own sister-in-law for green stamps. So Quagliomo admits defeat.
We're back with Nishimoto. He's now examining his check under the microscope, and he notices that the very fine print says, play money.
I didn't see that when I looked at it, so could it really be there? Next, Dr. Pinikhes trying to actually fire Hopfnagel, but Hopfnagel has evidence of his only surgical mistake.
There was a surgery where a sponge was left inside of Mrs. Beach during surgery. Hopfnagel has the x-rays to prove this. He tells Pinikhes he can keep these. He has his own copies.
Hopfnagel also has jars containing the sponge and the woman's cervix that Dr. Pinikhes took out by mistake. So he's got a raft of evidence there.
Then Hopfnagel asks when he can expect his 50% raise.
Wow, he really is a smooth operator. Now it's time for Lester to move to his new room. It's the VIP suite. Always sees him being escorted there.
Then he calls Laffingwell to tell him that his cover is blown and Hopfnagel has offered him a job for $250 a week and he's considering taking it. Alice comes in, undresses, and drags Lester into bed. Laffingwell is still on the phone, saying that they can match whatever it is they're paying, but Lester is no longer on the phone. He's busy.
No, and I don't think they can match what Alice is doing to him right now. As they go at it, we see that Hopfnagel and Lamarr are watching through a false vent in the room. Actually, they're behind his wall-mounted television set, holding a camera and filming the proceedings. The amorous activity of Alice and Lester make Lamarr horny, so she tries to get it on with Dr. Hopfnagel right there and then.
Lamarr is getting excited, starts nibbling on Hopfnagel, who's getting annoyed because he's trying to film this and she's making his hands shake.
However, she wins him over and he starts kissing her, but in doing so, he knocks the fake TV window out of the wall, exposing the space between the two rooms. Alice, of course, hears this and goes over to what is now a window between the two rooms and sees Hopfnagel and Lamarr on the floor together. Lamarr laughs at her.
I take it our engagement is off, says Hopfnagel. Lamarr laughs spare no expense as they leave, and Alice tells Lester that she can get him anything he wants to help him take Hopfnagel down. Charts, testimonies, whatever. Step into my office, says Lester, pulling her back into bed with him.
Now we find out that Laffingwell has been listening in via the phone this whole time.
And we fade to black. We fade back in to see a mariachi band entering the hospital.
Alice directs the band to the party in Lester's room.
From his office, Hopfnagel checks the back of the Pepsi machine facade, but there's no change for him. Damn machine must be giving out Pepsis, he mutters. A man goes into Hopfnagel's office to get him to settle the bill for the festivities.
He's part of the mariachi band.
What festivities, he wonders. And Hopfnagel discovers that there's a party going on. Hopfnagel, with the representative from the mariachi band still following him, asks Alice to confirm whether he ever authorized this. Yes, says Alice, and then she quotes him, I want Epstein's stay here to be one continuous party.
So Hopfnagel gets his checkbook out and pays the bill, and as we remember, those aren't real checks. But this time we're actually in Lester's room with all the partygoers.
They're singing for He's a Jolly Good Fellow, and as the song winds down, Dr. Pinikhes laments that he's performed every surgery known to man except for circumcision. Dr. Quagliomo tells him that he has a patient due next week, and if it's a boy, he'll let Pinikhes perform the operation. Then they realize they have Epstein in custody at the hospital already, and Pinikhes thinks he may have missed his chance for a twofer, but they can still talk to Epstein and see if it's still in the realm of possibilities.
Well, the reason they say this is because the one female doctor, Dr. Kincaid, says that she noticed during the surgery that she wasn't even at, that Epstein, in quotes, hadn't had something removed as a child. So now they know that Epstein was never circumcised. They would have assumed that he's Jewish and he's circumcised. Lester calls Laffingwell to say it's 0 hour now, and then he and Alice dance their way out of the room and down the hallway past a pre-op patient who's lying alone on a gurney in the hallway. and they go into the linen closet.
So the time has come for Laffingwell to make that surprise inspection. But when he gets to Vista View, he finds the reception area empty.
He's more surprised than they are.
He goes into another room where a woman has just given birth. The cabbie from a ride over is there too. He's not the father, and she didn't deliver in the cab. The cabbie actually helped her deliver right there.
Yeah, Dr. Zerny was her OB, and he didn't show up. And then she decides not to stay to avoid a bill. She, the cabbie, and the new baby leave together.
Laffingwell heads to the elevator and is joined by Dr. Zerny, still dressed for his golf game.
And holding his clubs.
Zerny says he has to get up to maternity and hopes that he isn't late, and Laffingwell tells him that he is, and it's a boy. Oh no, says Zerny, another disputed bill.
He tells Laffingwell that he asked to play through, but they wouldn't let him even when he said he was a doctor. No respect, says Laffingwell. And now Laffingwell's in Lester's room. He's found the party, and he abruptly stops it. Everyone there sees who just arrived, and Dr. Pinikhes chases Laffingwell as he leaves the room.
Laffingwell continues his investigation. He looks into a patient's room and finds what he calls a very dead man in there. He asks Nurse Throttle about it, and she says that if she doesn't write things down, it's Forgetsville.
It's the dead man from the beginning of the movie. He's been there the whole time.
He's racking up charges.
The way that line was delivered, though, was so good. Oh, if I don't write something down, it's Forgetsville. So daffy.
Well, it's funny because Nurse Throttle isn't one of the older nurses. She's probably in her late 40s, early 50s, but she looks like a 70-year-old today.
We see Hopfnagel in his office putzing about, and he grabs a metal trash can and puts it on top of his desk. Dr. Pinikhes is still chasing after Laffingwell. He opens the door to a linen closet so they can talk privately, but instead they find a catfight between Nurse Lamarr, who's nearly nude, and Alice, who looks a mess. Dr. Pinikhes asks what he can say. Goodbye, says Laffingwell.
Hopfnagel is still trying to destroy evidence when he gets a phone call. It's Laffingwell's secretary calling to warn him that Laffingwell's on his way over there now. Run for the hills, says Hopfnagel, and he throws a match into the wastebasket.
Upstairs, Dr. Quagliomo and Dr. Pinikhes are in the ruins of the party, and they see a passed-out Lester. The soundtrack plays Hopfnagel, so they do an impromptu circumcision on poor Lester.
They justify this by saying that one day he may want to marry Barbra Streisand.
But will she want to marry him? He's no James Brolin.
Laffingwell bursts into Hopfnagel's office just as he's putting out the fire that he started. Hopfnagel picks up the phone and says he's finished inspecting the wastebasket and he has an order placed. Then he tells Laffingwell that he wasn't expecting him. Laffingwell thinks that's obvious, what with the orgy going on upstairs. Alice comes in to gloat about Hopfnagel's demise.
Alice has some evidence, which Hopfnagel snatches away. Alice tells Laffingwell that he better get a hold of that.
Then Nishimoto comes in with an officer who places Hopfnagel under arrest for writing a phony check. Hopfnagel manages to push everyone out so he can speak with Laffingwell privately.
As he's getting rid of Nishimoto, he also fires him. Back in the office, Laffingwell demands that Hopfnagel hand over those papers. Hopfnagel says, sure. Then he hears Nurse Throttle knocking on the Pepsi machine. She's wondering if she's going to be fired. She reveals to us, not him, that she's his mother, but he fires her anyway. While Hopfnagel is distracted, Laffingwell finally gets to snatch that proof out of his hands.
So at the next board meeting, Laffingwell tells everyone that they can continue without consequence, as it seems that Hopfnagel was the real problem here.
Well, he tells the board that, yeah, they all suck, but this city needs hospital beds, so they're going to leave it open. He says he's going to regret that decision, and as he walks out of the room, he's mumbling that, yes, he already regrets it. But the board rejoices.
An ambulance arrives at Vista View and brings in a new patient. Dr. Pinikhes asks, where does it hurt? In the wallet, the patient says, it's Hopfnagel. Pinikhes asks everyone else to leave. Hopfnagel says he wants Pinikhes to operate on him and remove his appendix so Hopfnagel can sue the hospital and win. Pinikhes threatens to call the hospital association, but Hopfnagel reminds him about the sponge that was left inside that patient. He can still play that blackmail card.
He does plan to give Pinikhes half of the malpractice money that he gets, or so he says.
Pinikhes says that Hopfnagel will be taking a risk. He'll be unconscious and vulnerable, but Hopfnagel says that he trusts Pinikhes. He's a doctor after all.
He swore an oath. But Dr. Pinikhes has a way around that. He finds Dr. Zerny to convince him to do the surgery solo. It's time he flew on his own.
So in the operating room, Hopfnagel seems to have a moment of regret when he sees who's performing the surgery.
What's weird is that he's not out, but Dr. Zerny has a scalpel to his abdomen anyways.
Yeah, Dr. Zerny kind of looks away as he's cutting because I guess he doesn't like the sight of blood. And and Hopfnagel leans back in his bed and says 10-4 as he fades into unconsciousness.
And that's the end. Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we're talking about Where Does It Hurt from 1972.
A March 1970 Daily Variety news item announced that director Rod Amateau's first novel, The Operator, co-written with Bud Robinson, which was to be published that year in the United Kingdom, had been optioned by London-based producer Art Cooper. Shooting was set to take place in the United States, and Paul Burke, Ian McShane, and singer Jack Jones were mentioned as possible stars. Joseph Shaftel ended up serving as executive producer.
A May 1971 Daily Variety news item announced that the British company, the Hammond Group, was financing Shaftel's production of Where Does It Hurt, and that the film was still to be shot completely in the U.S., but Hammond was not listed in any other source, and the extent of their participation in the release film had not been determined at that time. Although on August 30th, 1971 Hollywood Reporter news item announced that Amateau and co-producer Bill Schwartz had signed Rosalie Berman as the picture's associate producer, filming had been completed by that time, and the extent of Berman's contribution to the picture, if any, has not been determined.
A blurb published in January of 1972 in the Culpeper Star-Tribune reported that Eve Bruce, all 5 feet 11.5 inches of her, had landed a big part in a new comedy, Where Does It Hurt, with Peter Sellers and Joanne Pflug.
Now, I don't have a source for this. I just found this bit of trivia, so I'm reporting it regardless. Where Does It Hurt was filmed with much of the production money invested by director Rod Amateau and actor Peter Sellers, making the director and star both acting producers of the film. On the first day of filming, Sellers asked Amateau to arrange a limo to take him to set. Amateau said sure, but since Sellers was splitting the costs and the profits, the ride would cost him $50 per day. The next morning, Sellers arrived at the studio in the passenger seat of a pickup truck driven by the film's key grip. Passing Amateau on the way to set, Sellers explained to the director, "He lives near me." So this is going against what the source that I found, that the Hammond Group entirely financed the film. But it's kind of a good story, so I included it anyways.
During production, an August 3rd, 1971 Daily Variety item noted that the Screen Extras Guild, protesting the reverse runway production aspect of the UK production being filmed in the US, picketed the film while it was shooting at producer's studio.
A blurb in Peter Hall's syndicated screen time column, published in the London Evening Mail on May 6, 1972, previewed producer Joseph Shaftel's upcoming films and said that Where Does It Hurt had finished production and would be released in the UK in May.
James Bacon's Hollywood Hotline column, published on June 15, 1972, reported that Peter Sellers, you might say, has changed his mind about Hollywood since making Where Does It Hurt in the movie capital. "I like Hollywood very much, especially these days," he is quoted as saying. "It's different now, completely different. The censoring is all gone. I mean, there's no hang-ups now. Before you were bogged down and crucified by various columnists."
Amateau's book, The Operator, released a year or two earlier, was subsequently retitled Where Does It Hurt when it was re-released as a movie tie-in book. Where Does It Hurt was released on September 29, 1972 in the U.S. The film was released by Cinerama Releasing Corporation and later acquired by AIP as part of its Cinerama Features package for its AITV division. It was subsequently re-released to theaters by American International in 1977, which we know from its production number.
Box Office Magazine recommended that theater owners capitalize on Sellers' history of playing wacky comedic roles and recommended a contest awarding passes to the person who can list the most films that he appeared in. They also suggested a screening for medical personnel, which, incidentally, may have hurt as much as helped drum up word-of-mouth business.
Yeah, I can't see how that would have gone over well. Taglines for Where Does It Hurt include, "Where does it hurt? Only where you laugh."
These hospital operators will have you in stitches.
Peter Sellers is Albert T. Hopfnagel, hospital administrator.
This man wants to be your doctor.
He'll fracture you.
Richard Kriskelly of the LA Herald Examiner provided a blurb that appeared in ads for the movie. The patients never get well, and the one-liners never stop in a stream of jokes. Where Does It Hurt is an undeniably funny movie.
Box Office Magazine wrote in their review, "As a satire, Where Does It Hurt is both broad and slowly paced, with a constantly recurring naughty cleverness perhaps a little indulgently employed for general audience taste. The screenplay serves up a variety of situations concocted to indicate the incorrigible corruptibility which is encouraged by the general rascality of hunger for money and sex. Amateau's uneven direction reveals more flaws than funniness. Keith Allison's music is a pleasing addition to a film that lacks sparkle, but may still do fair business." Boy, do I have a word to say about that.
A.H. Weiler, writing for the New York Times, wrote, "Peter Sellers and a staff of assorted comics doggedly try to make a laughing matter out of bloated hospital costs and medical monkey shines in Where Does It Hurt? But most of the time, they manage to be only frenetic rather than funny." Weller criticized Amateau's directing, saying he proceeded on the theory that speed, gags, explicit cracks, and sex were sufficient to make life at Vista View Hospital hilarious. Unfortunately, the basically thin storyline is overcomplicated by a plethora of plotting.
TV Guide, in a review published after the film's release, wrote, "The language is profane, the proceedings inane, and the story insane. If you hate doctors, Mexicans, homosexuals, blacks, Females, Catholics, Jews, Italians, Japanese, insurance companies, hospitals, Poles, and humanity. You'll love this movie.
The blurb in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune reads, Where Does It Hurt is a preposterously dull and vulgar comedy about a hospital run solely for financial gain.
But the Pittsburgh Press's short review praised Where Does It Hurt, calling it a hilarious spoof on doctors, hospitals, and the practice of medicine. Quality? Good.
Peter Citron in the Omaha World Herald wrote, Sellers gives bum checks, bum checkups, and practices creative medicine in a wallop of sick doctor jokes and 7th grade toilet humor. Its satire uses a meat cleaver, not scalpel, and its cheap quality comes through.
W. Christensen in the Idaho Statesman wrote, The film has an obvious satirical intent, but its many gutsy violations of the Hippocratic Oath make it unconvincing as medical satire. Christensen said, The rest of the characters are not too interesting and only occasionally funny, but what makes the movie successful is the omnipresent Peter Sellers, whose special brand of unctuous cynicism makes him an irresistible comedian.
Lou Cedrone, in a review published in the Baltimore Sun, wrote, All this is farce, similar to that found in the British-made carry-on comedies, and it works for about 50 minutes. Still, 50 minutes is more than most comedies can guarantee, and the remaining time is amusing enough.
Dick Banks in the Charlotte Observer wrote, The humor here is not the brilliant and subtly original sort that makes for a comedy classic. At best, Sellers comes on like the Marx Brothers, though never so frantically paced. He makes this film a laugh riot by the quantity rather than the quality of rowdy incidents that portray professional deviousness, painting lust and incongruous conviviality as the caricature structure of hospital affairs.
Jim Hopwood in the Decatur, Illinois Herald and Review wrote, Where Does It Hurt is supposed to be a black comedy, but most often it is simply a bleak comedy. The movie has some very funny moments, but too often it slips from the macabre to the morbid.
Joseph Gelmus in New York's Newsday called Where Does It Hurt one of those Peter Sellers comedies that makes sense only when it was conceived and packaged by agents. As hospital administrator, Sellers is forced to operate in a screenplay that could bring a malpractice suit to a lesser talent. Forget it.
The Santa Barbara News Press PTA Review said, Where Does It Hurt is a so-called comedy about the administrator of a slick Southern California hospital who divides his time between the greedy board of directors and the pretty females on the loose, whom he likes to assault in linen closets. Not very funny, and in bad taste.
Reportedly, the American Medical Association acquired the rights to this film in order to ban it in the United States. In the middle of 2019, though this film had not appeared on home video, it was available on at least one streaming service at that time. All right, Jeff, that was a lot of reviews for this movie, but the only review that really matters is ours. What did you think of Where Does It Hurt?
Well, I think that this film in many ways is a mystery, and that mystery is why AIP felt the need to re-release this theatrically in 1977, and even Filmways did a release in 1980.
Well, I was looking through some old newspaper articles. I have access to the newspaper archive, and I found this movie in theaters in 1973, 1974, 1975, 1976, 1977, 1978, so it doesn't surprise me that it was there beyond. Now, these weren't first-run showings or anything, but the fact that you could see this movie theatrically 8 years after it came out is kind of weird. Maybe not for the time period, but seems weird now.
Well, definitely now, because we're in a home video age that didn't exist back then.
True.
And I can't think of any other reason except that maybe Peter Sellers, because Peter Sellers was kind of big in the 70s, as I recall. I was 5 years old, and I knew who Peter Sellers was.
He's the Pink Panther.
The Pink Panther, the first two movies came out in 63 and 64, respectively. And then Alan Arkin did one. But then in 1973, I think Blake Edwards revived the Inspector Clouseau character with Peter Sellers, and that's when it really blew up.
And plus, by then, the originals would have been on television, and there's also Dr. Strangelove. He was in that weird movie Being There. That came later, though. But yeah, Peter Sellers was in known quantity.
That has to be the reason that they kept this thing going, because the movie itself isn't that great.
No, it's not. I have mixed feelings about it. At first watch, I was totally against this movie. It's really dumb, and I don't feel like my opinion on that has changed. And it's not very, I don't know, the hospital looks so outdated. All the colors are muted, and the characters aren't likable. There's so many racial stereotypes, and the music, oh my God, it is so annoying. I can't believe someone called it the sparkling addition to the movie. It's irritating as heck.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping this would be kind of a smart comedy and an interesting take on the medical industry and trying to take it down, kind of a black comedy, but it was mostly just mean and degrading.
Right, and that's a topic that's ripe for exploitation as satire. The things that happen are ridiculous. Insurance companies, doctors, everything that happens to you, all the indignity of being in the hospital, that's perfect comedy fodder. And what they do with it is so crude and vulgar and tasteless while being occasionally funny.
I think it was just the wrong format for this story because as a film, I don't think it worked, but it would have worked great as a Mad Magazine spread. It plays like a Mad Magazine spread.
It plays like sketch comedy, too. There's all these bits that happen, and they are loosely connected by a story, but they're more impactful as individual moments than they are as part of a whole. And the only good thing I have to say about it are the performances, really.
Yeah, I would say the performances are adequate.
Well, I think they elevate the material a bit because the real problem with this is the screenplay, the directing, everything that was... I never read the book, obviously. I'm not going to have read the book. But I don't know if that was any smarter. But this is just lowest common denominator stuff.
Yeah, the screenplay and the directing, and those are both products of Rod Amateau, and I never would have taken him from being one of the creative forces behind the Many Loves of Dobie Gillis.
Who's also the mind behind the Garbage Pail Kids movie and a lot of episodic television. But as a movie director, he directs like he's doing a TV show. It's just a bunch of sight gags, setting up a punchline, doing the punchline. Although underneath it, there is a core of good in this story. And it's basically the incorrigible corruptibility of Albert T. Hopfnagel.
Right. I have a tremendous respect for what it is he tried to do. I just don't think he pulled it off.
I think he did, but what he was pulling off wasn't that good. I don't know. On the second watch, I actually appreciated it more than the first watch, believe it or not. And I think that was all down to Peter Sellers' performance. And that was just me marveling at how well he skates out of every trouble he finds himself in. He's got people at his door trying to serve him with a warrant and trying to investigate him. And he just manages to shuffle everybody out of his office. He gets fired and he's like, no, I'm not. And then he's not. He's not fired. I kind of envy that. Being able to go through life and everything slides off you except for money. How do you get to that point? That was the most admirable thing about that movie is how he made this character come to life. But he's a terrible person, and there's nobody to like in this whole movie.
Well, what I think that Amateau is trying to do here is kind of expose what I'm sure a lot of people were already thinking about how maybe this medical profession might not be all on the up and up.
Can you imagine what they would do with that now? They probably have. I can't think of anything at the moment, but this would be a great time to do a movie like this, but to do it better. Because in the United States, our system is ridiculous. You can have insurance and not be able to afford to use it. And if you don't have it, well, then you're hosed. And it's not funny. You definitely get a black comedy out of that. But this one is so bleak, like the one review said. Until the final moment, the bad guy wins. And then we don't know if he survives that surgery or not. He doesn't look like he has much of a chance, given Dr. Zerny being alone in the operating room with his eyes closed. Actually, I thought Harold Gould did a good job playing an idiot, which I know he's done before, the Golden Girls. So that might be his wheelhouse. I don't know a whole lot of his work, but that was funny. There were some funny bits.
I think that Harold Gould probably had the most natural performance of anybody here.
Yeah. I really felt like he was an idiot with a scalpel. Totally bought it.
A lot of the characters like Alice Gilligan, I don't understand her motivation at all.
No, what does she see in him? He's a two-timing weasel. He's evil. Why does she want to marry this guy? She likes the money that she's making. I don't know how this hospital gets away with it. All you have to do is walk in. They don't even try to hide it. You don't have to surprise them. There's mayhem every moment. There's a dead body moldering in a room for a week or two. I don't know how much time passed, but I assume at least a week.
Another performance of note has got to be Pat Morita and his ever-changing accents.
Right. He's really funny in this. He deserves a better movie, and I know he got them eventually. He's having fun with this. You can tell.
Yeah, we didn't mention in our review, but there's a scene where he starts doing karate moves.
Oh, right. But when he does it, he's like, Nikon, Minota. He's shouting out Japanese camera names.
Yeah, this movie is so racist and degrading, and there is something to offend everyone.
It's sexist. It's homophobic. The music cues are racist. How do you do that? Ugh, it's embarrassing.
Yeah, so maybe for the best of this movie is nearly impossible to find, at least here in the U.S.
Yeah, I don't recommend anybody watch it. I think you can make a good sketch out of the few funny bits that are in here, but as a whole, it's a slog. We thought we'd get through our recap pretty fast, but there's a lot happening in here. But maybe we're doing a public service by warning people not to find this movie. We watch it so you don't have to. All right, so now it's time to diagnose this movie using our AIP scale, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic. What grade do you give it, Jeff?
Well, like you, I did appreciate this movie a little more the second time around. And if you listen to our review, you probably enjoyed it more than you would enjoy the movie because it sounds a lot better on paper than it actually is. For one thing, you don't have to hear that stupid song over and over again.
Theme song.
The Where Does It Hurt theme song. They play it constantly throughout the film, and it gets stuck in your head, and it's not a good thing to have in your head.
Mm-mm.
I don't think there's any part of this so-called comedy where I laughed out loud. I may have smiled at some parts. Well, I'm sure I smiled at some parts. But no belly laughs here. I don't really want to give it a P because it's not an awful movie. I mean, it's awful in its technique and it's awful in the things it says and does. But as a production, it's not awful. But I also don't want to give it an I because it's not that good.
Are you inventing a new point in our scale?
Well, on a 5-star scale, I would probably give it a 2-star, which means it's going to be rounded up to an I on our AIP scale. So this is an intermediate I.
You should give it an M for mediocre. I've tried to do that.
I wouldn't say it's as good as mediocre. How do you grade this one?
I probably laughed more than you did. And that's just down to the performances. There's a couple times when Nurse Throttle gets busted with the dead patient. And the way she delivers this line, if I don't write something down, it's Forgetsville. It was really funny. So that was amusing. But yeah, overall, this movie made me feel bad more than it made me feel good. I know that going to the doctor sucks. I know that medical bills are terrible and all that. I don't really need something this heavy-handed, this broad to bring that home. Something a little more subtle, with a little more poignant maybe, with a little more human feeling, more grounded in reality, might have been better. And I think you can find stuff like that in sitcoms. Maybe like MASH, which obviously is about war, but it's also about doctors. And that managed to be funny, so it can be done. That was a satire as well. And I recommend you find that instead of trying to track down this movie. Peter Sellers was very good in a role that he really didn't need to play. So I do give him credit for that. But I didn't put this in the notes, but one of the reviews called this the nadir of his career, and that might be true. It's better than it ought to be, just because of some of the performances, but it just ought not to be. But like you, I don't really want to say this is pathetic because of the good things that I mentioned. However, that soundtrack, that's dragging it down. So like you, I would give this somewhere between an I and a P, but I'll be generous and round up to an I as well. So same, intermediate, but it doesn't deserve that much, honestly. It just doesn't deserve the worst grade.
This is another one that we watched from Cinerama that AIP wound up re-releasing at a later date. And unfortunately, we had to cover it on the podcast.
Well, it was on AITV, and we've done an AITV stretch before, and we'll do one again. So it might be better as a summer episode, but all the same. It's here, we watched it. We're done.
And we're done with it. Yeah, it did receive a theatrical release, so that's why we released it as part of our regular series. And again, I just have to ask, why? And again, the only answer I could think is Peter Sellers.
There's no other selling point to this movie, really.
So to find out more about the films we cover in the podcast, even the Cinerama releases, you can go to our website, aippod.com. There you can watch trailers, see posters and lobby cards, listen to the podcast, and find our links on social media and to our store, where your purchase will help us to keep creating this podcast. Again, that's aippod.com.
Well, now I think it's time to call it, at least on this episode. For the American International Podcast, I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.